Any questions to Mr. Berry with regard to this information? Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Berry, one of your slides, you talked about what you said was an insignificant increase in land if we move the urban containment boundary from to include, and so I thought the numbers were more than it was a large number, actually.
Yeah, thank you. If I said insignificant, then I certainly misspoke. What I was trying to convey was relative to the threats outside, that it was an insignificant amount of land relative to the threats outside. And certainly my duty is to the City of Nanaimo taxpayers. I would prefer to see that economic benefit, the taxes paid, the spin-offs, the density, the other benefits that we talked about, economies of scale within the city proper. Right now, the discussion isn't regional. The discussion that, and I was talking to Councillor Holdham, who did an excellent job at the PNAC meeting, but the whole discussion's about the city and the city's UCB. And to some extent, that's a meaningless discussion without some contextual discussion outside.
So just to follow up on that, my question though, we would in fact be increasing the land mass by approximately a third. That was what I got from that slide.
Well, one of the things that's not well understood about the UCB, Councillor Cameron, is that the UCB is a temporary construct until such time as there's infilling, even in its initial application, until we proceed to development. So we've used the example before of Lindley Valley. It's understood that Lindley Valley was on reserve and wouldn't be developed until various conditions set by council were set. So from my point of view, not only is the city boundary more defensible, it's a clearer representation of where we're at. 5 years ago, when we, or whenever the UCB was in place, no one could conceive of 1,000 lots above Landsville or the Shady Mile being gone with large houses. So it's a relative discussion I'm talking about of where can we protect. If City of Nanaimo was protecting, if I thought the areas outside we're doing as much as the City of Nanaimo has done historically to protect the UCB, I'd say stand on the line. But right now we're standing on the line and maybe paradoxically forcing people to do stuff outside. Maybe I stay awake at night thinking maybe we should have advanced Lindley Valley earlier to prevent some of these other developments, because they would have been preferable.
Mr. Chairman, just procedure. Can we move to item 11F at this point, or do you want to wait till we reach it on the agenda?
It's up to council. If you want to move to, we go to there and...
Well, since this presentation seems so connected to that, I'd move that we bring forward item 11F at this time.
Where's 11F?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's I was using the white sheets.
Oh, yeah.
So who knows what it is now.
Oh, I know. I was looking at the wrong sheets myself. 11.
It is 11F. Still 11.
You're right. I was looking at the wrong thing. 11F, which is page 4, top of page 4 of the green amended sheets. Go ahead.
Okay, well, to get that on the floor, I'd move staff recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4.
You want to read them out?
It's under the heading of the Official Community Plan 10-Year Review Update, and the staff recommends, and I move that Council directs staff to realign the urban containment boundary to coincide with the city boundary in the draft Official Community Plan, excluding agricultural land reserve designated lands. And 2, to direct staff to amend the draft Official Community Plan to include policies for an urban reserve designation applied to Lindley Valley and the Jinglepot neighborhood area. And 3, release the draft Official Community Plan for public consultation. And 4, include specific strategies for public input with respect to the UCB amendments and urban reserve policies proposed in the draft Official Community Plan.
Move Councillor Holdham, second Councillor Unger. Discussion on that. Well, let's go to the people who had other comments earlier. Councillor Brennan, I think, was next.
I think that this question is relevant given the motion. In any case, it's not just on the presentation. But I just wondered if you mentioned that council will not downzone. I think that's been your experience, and it's probably a pretty good...
It's been council's policy.
Okay. But if council won't downzone or increase regulation, how do you see Nanaimo influencing the RDN to do that?
Well, as the fellow said at the end of the video, you need to take these kind of ideas and spread the word. In fact, the municipal members of the regional district can clearly control this vote. If they want to change alternatives, and if they have the will, they can change the direction. And this isn't the municipalities versus the electoral areas. It happens that the electoral areas happen to have the land that's still worth saving, largely. They also happen to have a constituency who believes, I would say, they can speak for their own constituents, but I would say many of the residents of those constituencies would like to see those lands preserved, and in my opinion, don't understand the potential threat that they're under. If you've lived adjacent to Arrington for 50 years, and the trees have always been there, you think they're always going to be there. But the world has changed. I've been here for 50 years, and the kind of houses you saw around, people didn't build those kind of houses. The lots in Lanceville right now are selling for every lot $400,000 and up. It's I'm tempted to say a brave new world, but it's not a world we've experienced. So there's nothing wrong with that, but if that's not the course that council wants to head to, or they don't like the implications that occur, because every time someone decides to live way outside Nanaimo, then they're not contributing to the pool. And with some exceptions, we've tried to make some progress on that, but it's always an uphill battle. It's not as if you're inside the municipality contributing to those services.
But the second bullet there, for want of a better word, is to include policies for an urban reserve designation applied to Lindley Valley. Oh, okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding this. This is not to draft policies to apply to the Lindley Valley and Jingle Pot, but you're giving that as an example? Because I'm wondering where Cable Bay would come in here, how that would have...
Mr. Swaby can explain.
I'm sorry. The recommendation involves asking council whether you want to move the UCB. In doing that, we also would recommend that we bring in designations, new designations for the draft plan for review that actually deal with the larger vacant tracts of lands to put them into an urban reserve, exactly the same as Lindley Valley is in now, that would require further development of comprehensive plans that meet all the community goals that would then come forward as an OCP amendment to council at a later date before they develop. We're also suggesting something like Cable Bay, which is an active application. If it fails the test of council and goes down, that you still move the UCB out to the city boundary, but you put an urban reserve on that property. If Cable Bay proceeds along with the UCB, it would have a new designation that allows for the nodal development, recreational development that is proposed by the applicant.
Are you saying that if council adopts this, particularly the recommendation regarding implementing an urban reserve, that there would be as good or even better protections for council in the future to be able to deal with densification and servicing than an existing urban containment boundary policy does now?
Your Worship, that's what I'm saying. The only difference is that the UCB, which is a line on the map, can only be changed every 3 years. You would still have to prove the servicing, prove the community type services in terms of mixed use and all those sorts of things before you were able to get a new designation put on the property by council, and then get a rezoning application following that.
There would be a public process for the neighbors and the community to have a say in that.
In fact, there would be the same two public processes, the OCP amendment and the rezoning application.
Fair enough. Follow-up, Diane?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused here about the impact or the effect on the application, that the Cable Bay application. Last time we met, we sent that, we sent that to staff to draft a bylaw, which, if passed, would then send the question to public hearing. That would be a question of moving the urban containment boundary. Just so happens, I guess, that it involves the Cable Bay lands. This would be similar, except that it would include all the lands now not included?
Yes, it is confusing, I'm sorry, Your Worship. Both Cable Bay and the South Nanaimo lands, which were previously approved by Council, are actual applications which have proven out that they are a nodal type development and mixed use and not monolithic, and they involve an actual land use associated with the designation that they're asking Council to put on the property. In order to have that designation on the property, you have to move the urban containment boundary to do that. So that's the difference in that case. Something like the Jinglepot neighborhood or Lindley Valley don't have development applications. So when you move the urban containment boundary away from them, we're suggesting that you overlay that with a new urban reserve designation, which requires the same kind of application that Cable Bay and South Nanaimo have made to you.
I've got a number of people on the list. Councillor Hold'em, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Manas, Councillor Sherry.
Well, Your Worship, I made the motion in order to get it on the floor, and because it flowed from the presentation we had just seen, I would hope that we can look at this issue as the larger contextual issue rather than having it influenced by specific applications. And in fact, I would hope that we would deal with this issue before we deal with active or future applications. But apart from that, I just want to ask some questions about how this would work. This part of it, as I understand from the presentation, this motion is only part of what we need to do. There's another shoe that needs to drop. If we're going to include the entire city within the urban containment boundary, which, by the way, has some very valuable and sensitive areas that are worth preserving, as is, within it, then we need to take some action at the region to ensure that those rural areas outside the city are not going to be used for the kind of development that we saw in the presentation. So does staff have, coming forward, an equivalent set of recommendations or strategies regarding how to regain our participation in the planning function at the regional district and how to exercise that? How likely to exercise that?
That would be part of a comprehensive approach. What we're doing right now, Your Worship, is the Mayor has convened a meeting of various representatives at the regional district to discuss the kinds of things that we're discussing tonight. I will be making a similar, although more in-depth, presentation to the mayors of the various municipalities and the regional board chairperson about the kinds of things that we do need to do collectively. We're not making those recommendations to City Council per se because, quite frankly, we expect to get broad support at the region that is not merely Nanaimo or led by Nanaimo, but led by a broad coalition that understands the threat and has a common interest. And quite frankly, I've said the municipalities because those are the parties we get to talk to, but I expect some of the electoral area directors to also support that approach. And I'm expecting the regional board chairperson and the regional manager to seek their concurrence as well. Some regional directors, for various reasons, will not be attracted to that approach. Some will have issues of timing, et cetera. So this is the first step in dealing with those issues internally that council can deal with, but Councillor Hold'em's exactly right. It's meaningless without the concomitant conclusions outside, but it can't be Nanaimo. It has to be everyone together, and we're initiating that discussion.
Second, assuming that we did this and we got the agreement regionally to do the complementary part outside the city, then we will have a much larger area, not that much larger as the map shows, but significantly larger area that would be available for development should development proposals satisfy a whole set of criteria and move through the process within city boundaries.
The exception I would make, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, is would be available for some form of development. Most of these areas, and Councillor Hold'em knows this, are available for development right now.
Yes.
The question is what form? Because it's often understood by the public, and so I hope you appreciate the clarification. The public often believes that those items that are under application right now, the alternative is that nothing will happen. That's not the case.
That's true. Something will happen. It's whether it's a desirable change or undesirable change to the status quo. Okay, I get that. But we have as one of our objectives to densify the community as much as we can so that the services are more efficient, particularly busing and so on. Okay, is there an opportunity in making this kind of change to also change the OCP so that we could sequence our preferences? In other words, say we wanted to direct as much of the new growth downtown as we could. Could we say that is our, that's the sequence we would like to follow? Development downtown and then mid-range and then on the outer edges or something like that?
That's excellent because in fact the sequence that we're suggesting to you, and this is why I'm suggesting the city boundary because it helps to make things simple, is the sequence is Nanaimo first, and then others. The opportunity that you're mentioning would have made sense if we didn't have the kind of hubris that we had in the 70s. What we should have done, with the glaring light of hindsight, is done what places like Whistler have done. There is no zoning. You can't do anything without an application. But that wasn't the case in the 70s. We zoned everything and said, bring it on. So the answer is more complex than just that. And that's why we're saying the line is probably the appropriate line at this point in time to make Nanaimo or the other growth centers, not to be Nanaimo-centric, to make the growth centers the priority.
So to make the growth centers the priority, can that be sequenced? So that we would give priority and preference to development proposals for the growth centers as opposed to in the middle of the border somewhere?
I'm going to drive you crazy. Yes and no. In terms of regulations, very difficult, almost impossible to do. But the way to sequence it is the old, always people are directed by self-interest. So if it's cheaper to build outside Nanaimo, you're going to do it. And if it's more expensive, you're going to build inside Nanaimo. So yes, we can sequence that. Right now we're doing precisely the opposite of what we want to achieve. And that gets us into the regional discussion about, it's very hard to have a discussion to take away people's property rights that they have or to be perceived to stop development. So the way to sequence it that's philosophically sustainable is to say, no, we're not stopping development, but we certainly expect you will pay your way. And in fact, if you're going to live 20 miles away from growth centers, maybe you should pay more, which gets us to the consumption issue. So all of these come in an integrated fashion.
Councillor Cameron, then Manhaston, Sherry, then Brennan. Oh, Councillor Manhaston.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, I'm just wondering if you can pull the item number 2, because I have a different opinion on number 2. So if the mover and the seconder agreed to deal with 1, 3, and 4, and do the second.
We can do these, are there any other components of the 4-point recommendation that council wishes to deal with separately? Okay, we're dealing with 1, 3, and 4 at the moment, or do you want? Yeah, okay, 1, 3, and 4.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm going to speak about the one, basically number 1. I do support the recommendation on number 1, because actually I've been advocating to the staff for a few years that I've been on a council that we need to take a control of the development that's going around us. And this is one way of achieving that we need to open up some of the areas to achieve that objective, so that all the areas in Benson Meadows and other areas in foothills that's going on. So I certainly support that and taking urban containment boundaries to the city boundaries. So I'll speak to the item 2 later on when it comes.
Thank you. Councillor Sherry.